So I have, how many of you have heard of charity water? Yeah, that's right. We always use them as examples. So we had to go and find the individual that creates or has created some of those incredible videos. And that's when we were introduced to Mo Scarpelli. So Mo Scarpelli is with Rake Films. Originally, she was the individual responsible for some of those compelling videos that we all see online. And before I bring Mo out here, what I want to do is introduce one of her films to you today called Exposed. It's the first part of a 4-part series that she had done around TB. And I hope you'll enjoy it for the next 12 minutes or so, because it will be fairly impactful for us all.
It's an ancient disease, is what I thought. I just didn't believe that. I was like, I can't be at risk for this. I'm strong, I'm healthy.
Do you need anything else, Bea?
I'm from Paris, Tennessee. It's rural Northwest Tennessee, home of the world's biggest fish fry.
Just go ahead and start the sandwiches.
Whoops. Fancy grilled cheese, y'all, right here.
My church from Nashville was taking a mission trip to South Africa. I knew I had to go.
I'm going to bless it real quick.
Yeah.
The nourish of our bodies and ourselves to your service. In your name I pray.
I got back in late December of 2007. January, I felt normal. And then by March, symptoms started to pop up. My doctor, he took a chest x-ray and he said, "You've got pneumonia." I went back for a follow-up. They did a needle aspiration right through here. They stuck the longest needle I've ever seen in my life through me and grabbed a piece in my lung and studied it. At the end of March is when they called me and gave me my true diagnosis. And they told me that I had tuberculosis. At that point, I thought, okay, I'm gonna be treated for 2 weeks on isolation, and then they can rehire me at my job and I'll go back to work and just continue to take the medication like nothing's wrong. What actually happened was those 2 weeks became 4 weeks, and those 4 weeks became 8 weeks, and then those 8 weeks became 12 weeks of isolation. Isolation separates you from everything that you love. I mean, I couldn't see my friends. I couldn't go to my job. What was inside of me was a threat to other people.
I could not see her. She couldn't see me. It was a family destroyer. That was a difficult time. I always just wished I was close enough to hold her. It's close to me, you know?
Jail, that's what she called it. She would get out, we'd go directly to the doctor's office, so she'd have had to wear the mask.
The mask, that kind of puts a stigma on you. You see a mask on someone, then you're gonna try to keep your distance. She felt dirty, you know, she felt like that people just were making a point to move away from her.
Every morning, a healthcare worker would come out to my house, give me all the oral drugs that I would take by mouth, and then I would come into Vanderbilt, have an infusion for a couple of hours, drive 30 minutes back home. I would take my second dose of oral medicine. That became my life for the next 2 years.
Well, TB's been a foe of man, dating back to the Egyptian pharaohs and mummies.
It's been described in ancient Indian texts 3,000–4,000 years ago. It was known as Shaya Roga, or the wasting disease.
In the UK, it used to be called the White Plague.
In the 19th and 20th century, it was the leading cause of death. 70 to 90% of the world's population in North America and Europe were infected. It was killing about 80% of the people that became sick with TB.
TB bacillus was discovered by Robert Koch, more than a century ago.
It was the treatments that was the game changer. If you look at the curve in the United States, it was coming down, from the early part of the 20th century down to the modern times. It was almost a straight line disappearing.
The notion was that we had the tools to control this disease. Incidence of TB was declining across the world. We globally got lulled into a sense of complacency that we had this problem under control.
So there was not a lot of incentive on the part of biotech, physicians, scientists who are interested in this. If you looked at the number of people, it is quite shocking. We had 1 or 2 grants for a total of about $300,000 or $400,000 of people working on tuberculosis. There was no interest in doing it.
Once the investment dried up, young scientists were not choosing to get involved in TB because there were no resources to do that research.
TB, in terms of the global agenda, was utterly neglected for a period of at least 4 decades.
We had a rude awakening in the 1980s when we had HIV. We had that blip up, which is a cold pail of water in our face saying, if you don't pay attention to TB, it has all the capability, even in a highly developed society like the United States, of bouncing back.
And now our vulnerabilities have been exposed. We're sitting in the world today with 1.4 million deaths, 9 million new cases each year of TB. That's a person dying every 30 seconds of this disease.
Now, all of a sudden looms up this realization that tuberculosis is a very, very serious problem, and particularly when you're dealing with multiple drug-resistant and extensively drug-resistant tuberculosis, it's getting worse.
MDR-TB is not like normal tuberculosis. Altogether, I was resistant to 7 drugs.
Very hardcore drugs.
The side effects of all those drugs were awful.
I used to get so tired standing for more than 5 minutes. Cycloserine, one of the drugs that I was on, the doctors joke and call it psychoserine because they say that patients just go crazy on it. It began to affect my short-term memory. I would constantly repeat myself. I would forget to show up places. I would forget to pay my rent and the bills. My fingers were numb. I would drop my cups of coffee in the morning.
You keep hearing something new with some of the drugs. You just didn't know what to expect.
So we didn't know if she was taking these drugs, whether they were even working or not.
I can remember one day at my apartment being on my knees and thinking, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of doing this. And I don't know that I'll make it through this.
We did not discuss it with the 3 of us, but we all knew inside that there was a real possibility that she might not live.
The reason why TB needs such special attention is that it doesn't get any. I mean, if I told you there was an airborne deadly disease that you could catch just by breathing in, that was killing over 1,000 people every day, would that make you a little bit nervous?
When you say how many people have TB, so how many people have the bacteria in their body? 1/3 of the world's population, over 2 billion. 1 out of 10 people who are infected will actually develop the disease at some point in their life, and that individual can infect up to 10 to 15 more people. These are the high disease burden countries: South Africa, India, China, Russia, many countries in Eastern Europe and throughout Africa. If you're poor and live in poor areas, you're more at risk. That's where the majority of the disease exists. But this is the modern world, the age of globalization. People are moving, they're taking buses, they're taking trains, they're mingling with many other people.
This is not a poor man's disease alone. This is also a middle class and a rich person's disease. Tuberculosis is infectious. Anyone can get it.
I think we're living in the developed world with the threat that dangerous drug-resistant strains of this disease are just a plane ride away in our global world and economy.
These bacteria don't carry passports here. This is a global phenomenon.
And in some point in all this, so I know how much money it was. I was such a burden to our health department by having MDR, and I drained their budget. We've just started figuring all of this out now, and it's really close to $1 million. It's completely unrealistic to think that, 10 people can be treated this way. We live in one of the richest countries in the world, and I know that if my case was a burden here, that this is not realistic to think that we can do this in a country where this disease is rampant and raging.
This is an expensive disease. You have not only the treatment costs in the billions, you have lost productivity and wages in the billions.
It's incredibly expensive to treat tuberculosis here in the UK. You're looking at £5,000 for a regular case of tuberculosis, extensively drug-resistant TB, you're looking at over £100,000. And that's per case. So if you go undiagnosed for 6 months and you've got drug-resistant TB, there's £500,000 minimum of expenditure to try and just treat the cases, let alone do all the associated testing to try and find where else it might have spent in the community and make sure you've got it all.
It's responsible for about 0.5% of the global economy's output. What does that really mean? 2010 terms, it's about $380 billion a year lost due to TB alone.
The kind of fear that we used to have of tuberculosis in the developed world is gone. The urgency, the attention we used to pay to it, that's not here anymore. The statistic that blows my mind is that if we were able to go to 100% detection for TB, so imagine we're in a perfect world. We're finding every person who has TB, we're treating every person that has TB, and they're all getting better. In the year 2050, there will still be 1 million new cases of tuberculosis every year because so many people still have the TB bacteria in their bodies. That's down from 9 million a year currently, so that would be a big success. But what that tells me is that we're never truly going to eradicate this disease without a vaccine.
Well, there's no effective vaccine against pulmonary TB, the most infectious form of TB. In the end, we really have to think about new tools, new drugs, new diagnostics, and new vaccines to treat one of the deadliest infectious diseases of humankind. I think it's the world's responsibility to deal with diseases that threaten us. This is about all of us. It's about me, it's about you, it's about our families. And I don't think any of us are really truly protected from a disease like TB.
Walking out of my very last infusion, I can remember feeling so triumphant and just thinking, thank God, I have made it. My husband, Brad, he's a contractor. I'll go and help him clean up the site. I have so much more energy, and I feel like me. Tuberculosis has really changed me. Now I can give a voice to the disease. I believe that a vaccine is completely necessary. It could have meant 5 years of my life back. Tuberculosis is not a disease that discriminates. If you breathe in, you can catch it.
Unbelievable. Thank you. So, Mo is one of the incredible filmmakers, and she is the one that inspires us all to act. And so I thank you for everything. Yeah. It's really appreciative. So you were wondering why there was some subtext there. 30 different languages, is that right?
Yeah, this was translated into many languages, so I think we got a link with, I'm not sure which one it was, but there's a lot of different. But the series was launched globally, so it was screened around the world. And our partners, there's 4 parts to this series, and this was just the first. And then the second is on drug-resistant TB on the rise in India, and that one got a large attention in Southeast Asia and India. But they've also been screened at vaccine conferences, global health conferences, the UN, WHO. Right. So tried to screen it as much as we can, mostly for people to kind of raise the profile of TB among the global health community was the intention, but also the public. I mean, obviously, Natalie's story is pretty relatable to like any other human being.
So talk about some projects you have coming up.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm working on a feature-length documentary about Afghan photojournalists, and it touches on the importance of free press. Afghanistan's going through this media revolution that happened basically after the Taliban banned photography in Afghanistan. So, but that's an independent film. And that's something I'm working on with a co-director in an independent capacity. It's a feature length. Otherwise, I actually just finished another short film with Eris called Undermined.
And Eris is who did the TB.
Yeah, sorry, Eris is the organization that I produced this series with, and they work on TB vaccines around the world. They're trying to pick the promising candidates for new TB vaccines, because like you just learned, we need them badly, and push them through the pipeline quicker. So they're a really incredible organization, and they have global reach and very, very, very interested in global storytelling, you know, like seeing the world all as one body, and that we, you know, something that happens just because it's happening across the world doesn't mean it doesn't affect the people in the United States. And as you can see with the airborne disease, there's a really compelling factor to that. It's that even if we eradicated all the TB in the United States, people travel, and there's a good chance that we never can eradicate it unless we get rid of it in the world. So, but anyway, we just finished a short film called Undermined, which is about the epidemic of TB and drug-resistant TB in South African mines, specifically in gold mines. But we focused on that issue in the mining sector and how it's flowing out into communities in Southern Africa and kind of spreading throughout the entire continent. And it's really a threat to everybody. So it's a very global story.
So one last question. Talk about film and the power of it, because we're going to be looking and talking, you're going to be talking with another new millennial filmmaker out there, Vanessa Black. But what's the power of film, and what can we do?
Well, it's amazing how film, I work in multimedia, so I do a lot of visual medium stuff like film and photography, but I write too, and I just find that film has this really incredible way of connecting you to someone else that you never thought you would normally connect with. There's something about hearing their voice, or reading their subtitles as you hear their voice, or just relating with their story, seeing them make grilled cheese in their house. You know, like, obviously you're going to relate more with Natalie than maybe some of the other characters that I usually focus on, which are around the world in all different languages. But if you watch the rest of the Eris series, you'll see that, we're making bologna sandwiches in South Africa in chapter 3, you know. But just the idea that there's these very, very common things beyond what you make in your kitchen, common threads of humanity that, like, you can't really escape. And I think film has a way of making you, like, you can't escape them the most, like, through film. You know, it's just so impactful, and it almost, like, burns it into your brain. And I almost think it's not your brain, it's like your heart, to be as cheesy as that sounds. There's something about film that, I don't know, you can connect with this other human in this really visceral way. And so I just see it as this super compelling tool to use to get people to care about things that they otherwise wouldn't care about. I think I wrote, like, for the blog post that we did before the conference about the fact that people don't really care about TB. If I were to make, there's obviously a lot of informational stuff in here, and hopefully it was compelling and people still watch, but you don't really care about the stats and the reports. What you really care about are humans, because you're a human and because they're a human. And so film just has this really special way of, like, tying you to those other humans. It's, like, almost hard to even explain. Yeah. But it's super compelling. I know Vanessa really believes in that as well, and that's why she's done international work too.
Okay. So with that transition, why don't you introduce us to Vanessa, and
Sure.
we're going to watch her film too.
Okay, great.
Go ahead.
So Vanessa Black, who I'm about to bring out, or we're going to watch her film first before I bring her out. Vanessa founded Black Film, a media production company whose mission is to create content that embraces pop culture language and then tell stories that can reshape our world politically and socially. She spent a month in Kiev documenting the current political and social situation there in Ukraine. And she has a film called #UkraineRising. Hashtag, like, not the word hashtag. Ukraine Rising aims to raise awareness about the Ukrainian crisis and also elevate social media for a greater good. It was a multifaceted project where the hashtag was where people came together on the story. It didn't end with a film or a conversation. It continues through the hashtag. And demand human news, not just breaking news. So it's a way of covering this conflict in Ukraine and this revolution through human stories, which is pretty exciting. And her work, Vanessa's work in general, encompasses commercial, fashion, documentary projects, as well as music videos that she's filmed around the world. I think we're watching yours.
Добрый день, меня зовут Алексей, я фотограф.
Меня зовут Эдик, я учусь еще в университете. Студент.
Меня зовут Катя, я помогаю. Мы начали снимать, самое интересное, с одного дня. Мы думали, мы придем, поснимаем один день людей. Мы начали снимать, мы поняли, что невозможно это сделать за один день. Мы начали
Потом давайте еще один день поснимаем, потом еще.
Третий, четвертый. Шестой день, и мы говорим людям, что это последний. Они говорят, а почему? Еще столько людей.
Я просто отпускать отсюда. Мы сколько можем вам еще всего рассказать? Бабушки, которые таскали, и дедушки, которые уже в таком пожилом возрасте, и таскали на своих спинах камни, которые потом бросались в Беркут. И это все это просто удивляет нас. И также вот мы беседуем с людьми, которые рассказывают такие небольшие истории, это их собственные впечатления, то, что они через что они прошли, что они увидели. А мы потом попробуем как-то это донести до всех наших остальных людей в нашей стране.
Мы общались с теми же женщинами, там, работниками на кухне, да. Потом, когда разговаривали с ними, выяснялось, что они вытаскивали людей с поля боя. Они там, действительно сделали настолько большое дело.
Так, это была идея сделать немножко такой свет более эпичный, драматичный, чтобы подчеркнуть все-таки, достаточно драматичные события, которые происходили в Киеве, и, в принципе, по-прежнему немножко происходит в какой-то мере. То есть, потому что эти люди пережили достаточно много, то есть это время, много горя, страданий, то есть очень много раненых людей к нам приходят, очень много людей пропало без вести. Мы познакомились 18 ноября на Шелковичной, когда я отступала от Беркута назад. По ночам мы приезжали ночные дежурства, когда было минус 15, минус 20. И уезжали только утром, у нас были смены такие недельные периоды, реально. Когда мы спали днем, ночью ездили на Майдан. И мне захотелось, просто этих людей видел вживую. И захотелось сделать этот проект об обычных людях, а не о каких-то политиках.
Я считаю, что очень нужный проект на самом деле. Мы делаем это для истории, для памяти, чтобы последующие поколения не забыли этих людей.
Очень здорово, ребята, вы молодцы, что вы это делаете.
Возможно, наш проект еще не закончен.
Герои, они среди нас, собственно говоря, идея.
All right.
Hey, MCON. What's happening?
This is Vanessa. We did the intro first, then her film. So I have a couple questions, and then I'll be kind of facilitating the discussion through questions that are coming through online. So first of all, why Ukraine? What led you there?
So I'm very interested in revolutions, and I've been following a lot of the revolutions that have been happening around the world in the last few years, which I'm sure many of you are aware of, from the Arab Spring to what's going on in Venezuela and Turkey. And then throughout all of history, I'm fascinated with how all of these movements are started by students and they're started by young people, but we very rarely get to talk to the young people that are starting these massive movements that are taking down governments and rocking revolutions. So I wanted to go and make this series from the perspective of a young person and go and talk to the young people that were doing this and see either what inspired them, what motivated them, and what it felt like to be in their position.
Did you have any surprises when you got there that you feel like, I mean, I'm sure you had a lot, but.
Well, Russia invaded 2 days after I arrived, so that was a big surprise.
Right.
But yeah, no, the whole thing, it was a big, beautiful, scary adrenaline rush, but it was absolutely life-changing. And now my work, I want to take the momentum that you find in a revolution and bring that home, because there's lots of revolutions we need to have in our society, whether it's like climate change or whatever else. I'm trying to take that momentum into my work in other areas to figure out ways we can, I guess, inspire each other and get the ball rolling on some of these things.
And someone just asked, did you encounter other filmmakers in Ukraine? So and I'm thinking like other native filmmakers, Ukrainian nationals, or millennials, or any other filmmakers that you came across while you were there?
Yeah, there are quite a few, and we're kind of like a little club now. We all works together, which is fun. But Maidan is a very small area. Maidan is Kiev's Independence Square, and that's where the revolution took place. So yeah, there were quite a few filmmakers, and we all collaborate still and promote each other's work and help each other out.
Cool. So maybe explain a little bit about why it would matter. I love that in the description of your work, you cover these political or social events, but you cover them in a way that you say is human news, not breaking news. Why is that important, and what does that really mean?
Well, I feel like the news is so unrelatable at times. It's so, I don't think people are relating to the anchor standing with a microphone, trying to convey what's going on. In conflicts like this, there's so many elements that take place that aren't necessarily conveyed. But at the end of the day, these revolutions are all started by very normal people, and often in crises, it's extraordinarily and overwhelmingly normal people that are having to face these challenges, and I think that that's the part that is interesting. It's about being like, what would you do if you're in that situation? So that was what I was trying to convey.
Great. Someone had a question that's been voted up a lot, so it sounds like people are really interested in doing this themselves. The question is, video can be expensive. Do you have any tips for video storytelling for nonprofits with a smaller budget?
Well, I did my whole project for $10,000, and it was a massive project. This is actually one of the 5 series. There's 5 of these, which you can see on my website, which is blkflm.com. But you can do these things affordably, and I think that's the cool thing about filmmaking now is we have access to camera equipment and people worldwide who are willing to help each other out. And you experience this in your work. We're all willing to help one another out, and we can get into stories without having expensive pre-production, and shooting can be pretty cheap with a 5D.
And how does, I'm curious for you, for me, the access to the stories on the ground, obviously I'm always a foreigner. I work in Africa a lot with my blonde hair, or Afghanistan, and it's like, it's really important to have contacts on the ground who are basically your, thorough way into a community to get more true stories and more honest stories. How did that unfold for you? And maybe you can talk a little bit about how, well, first, how did it unfold for you in Ukraine?
So I had spent time living in Ukraine, so I knew people who were there. I have a lot of friends who were there, and I had access to people in Kiev in a different way, though none of those people were people I interviewed. These were all people I found just by chance. And luck and whatever else. But to your point, too, it can be extremely dangerous work, so I would caution any kid who's like, I want to go to a war zone with my 5D, don't think that that's necessarily the safest thing to do. I think that we need to also caution young filmmakers, be very aware of what you're doing and don't rush into anything without the proper knowledge about what it is you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, and a lot of times that means contacts in country that you can trust. Do you think that also a part of kind of the question with the cost of working in some of these areas, I think sometimes fixers can cost a lot of money, but in my experience, I've been connected with people through social media and through this kind of decentralized world because of the internet that have allowed me access to communities, and I could set that up in pre-production. Has that been a part of your work too?
Yeah, it's a huge part of my work, and it's a lot of my work now. Now a lot of my work is relating these revolutions that are going on to conversations, so talking to kids who were part of the Arab Spring in Cairo, and then connecting them with kids in Kiev and saying like, hey, what did you guys get out of this experience? Which is something that is so interesting about our generation. We live in a time that we're able to make friends online that we would never have access to in any other time, and we don't even have to speak the same language. Through Google Chat or Google Translate, I can talk better, I can speak more clearly with my friends in Kiev now because I'm sitting on Facebook, typing in English, they're reading in Ukrainian or Russian, and then replying to my questions. It's unbelievable. And things like hashtags aggregate energy, and hashtags have only been around for like 5 years, I want to say. And they're really powerful tools, and the lesson that I've gotten the most out of this is that we have, as young people, it's so important for us to realize that we do need to elevate social media for a greater good and not just spam each other with content. I know we say content's king, but like we don't need to see your coffee. We need to really start elevating this and giving it the power that they deserve. Like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, these are really powerful tools. In Egypt, they brought down the 30-year Mubarak regime, which is just unbelievable. And I think if anything, that should serve as inspiration to millennials who we're talking to now in this room and online, that we can make huge change and be inspired by one another and have these conversations online and bring them on, but not even online, then it's coming full circle, and we have to take it offline again to give it the power that it deserves.
Right. This is a great question. I love this, whoever submitted it. Can you talk more about feeling of otherness when documenting different cultures? Where's the line between journalism and voyeurism?
Well, I think I didn't necessarily go in as a journalist. I went as a filmmaker, and somehow I distinguish those differently. But when I went, I wanted to go and talk to people who could relate to the questions I was curious about. I wanted to know, as a young person living in the United States, what does it feel like to be a young person in Ukraine? I wasn't trying to get anything out of them. It was really just like, how does it feel to be you? What inspires you? What gives you hope? What was the hardest part of this? So if that's voyeurism, then I don't know. I think that's just a conversation. I just want to have a conversation with my interviewees, my subjects.
Yeah. And do you feel like, I mean, you mentioned the part about doing your homework first.
Yeah.
But do you feel like it's important to also be aware that you are still a foreigner, that you're still coming from a place where you're going to be, leaving and returning back to a different culture again?
Yeah,
and telling
of course. And you have to be so careful about it. And when I got home too, I was so worried because I have all these subjects. These people's lives are in my hand. And when I got home, I was so concerned about their safety. So I got to come back to the security of the United States, but these people are still living in Maidan, or living in a country that's now facing the invasion of Russia. And throughout the entire revolution, it ended because there was lots of, well, I might get too political. I don't know if that's appropriate. But it's dangerous. They live in a very dangerous circumstance, and it is a responsibility that you bear, that I get to come home and be safe in the U.S., but then they're still living in a crisis.
Let's see. For both filmmakers, how do you maintain balance in your lives when your profession brings you in contact with such pain?
Good question. I think, life is hard no matter where you live, and I think that there's a lot of beauty that comes out of this, and unfortunately in the news you only really hear the tough stuff, but there's a lot of really cool stuff you hear about this. Like, you learn a lot about love, you learn a lot about caring about your fellow man, and you learn about community and how to fight for somebody else, which is so cool. Like, having someone else to stand up for is the most rewarding feeling it's just, so that's the stuff that you don't hear in the news.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that's really powerful, I think.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's like balancing, and you mentioned this about your subjects when you got home, having this feeling of responsibility. So in a way, you can kind of turn that pain, I don't know, it's almost like you can't get too caught up in the emotion and the pain at some point, because you really have a job to do.
Yeah.
You have the job to deliver this person's story who trusted you. So that trumps your own maybe coming to terms with, at least for me, and maybe that's just me deflecting, but I do feel like my first and foremost intention is to bear that responsibility.
Yeah.
It looks like we're out of time. Sorry, I'm even over time. But thanks so much.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Vanessa Black, everybody.
Yeah, and you can, if you have more questions, you can find both of us on Twitter and Instagram. Yeah. And if you're interested in seeing our social media aspect, if you go to @BlackFilm, you can see how we're trying to be innovative with news on Instagram. So check it out.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.